All right, welcome to another replay. So you may have seen the Great Balls of Fire video that I made just before this one, and I sort of showcased a situation where the Supreme Sorceress on the Pegasus Mount of Fire can be sort of in her element. I'm going to show you another video that sort of gives you the flip side of the coin in a situation where she might struggle. But to make it interesting, we're going to do a 2v2 format here, and yeah, it should be a fun replay. So over here, I've got my buddy Justice rocking the Dark Elves, and then myself also rocking the Dark Elves here on the right flank. And then on the far side, we have Denzin Wraith playing the Orks, and then the Skaven player is Exo-Patriotic Chaos. So very cool fight here. We're in the deserts. I don't know why, but we're in the deserts. I'm just going to go over my army really quickly. I've got 2 Dark Riders in the back and a Blackguard of Nagrand in case there were any large threats I had to deal with. I've got some Dark Shards, 1 unit of Harganeth Executioners, a unit of Sisters of Slaughter, Witch Elves, front line of Bleak Swords, and a couple Dread Spears, with 2 units of Corsairs with handbows, hoping that I could get into some Orc light infantry there with that selection. Justice has gone with 3 super chevroned up Sisters of Slaughter, and I guess he was hoping to find his way into some lightly armored Skaven troops. And I think it's a good play too, because the Skaven, they often have a lot of magic that can lower your armor. And if you're taking Sisters of Slaughter, they only have 5 armor anyway, so you're sort of negating all of that armor debuff that the Skaven has access to. So I really like that choice by Justice. The Skaven player's got a Doom Wheel over here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 units of Storm Vermin with Halberds. In front, there's a couple of units of Clan Rats Skaven slaves, and then just a little bit of missile play as well. And then 2 Plague Claw catapults. One is facing in my direction, the other is facing in Justice's direction. Now the Orc player, I think he's got the coolest army because he takes things that you don't normally see. First of all, you see Azhagel Slaughter on the Flying Mount. I mean, that's not so uncommon, but the fact that he worked in 2 giants and then all of these Orc Boar Boys made his army really unique. And then just regular Orc Boys in the back, like nothing crazy, very simple army, but a very dangerous one. These Orc Boar Boys are nothing to raise your nose at. With a weapon strength of 30 and like a really low cost, you can get a lot of these to dish out a huge amount of damage if you don't have the mobility to sort of take them out of the fight. And I knew right off the bat, like as soon as I saw his army, I thought like, oh shit, like I did not prepare to deal with like 6 units of cav and 2 giants. Like I've got 2 units of light cavalry here who are going to not trade very effectively versus those Orc Boar Boys, and like 1 unit of Blackguard to deal with 2 giants and all of that cav. I was like, that is deep trouble for me. I was like, so I was hoping, maybe I'll get lucky and get a leadership pick or something, but probably I'm going to be leaning on Justice to bail me out of this one. So with all that preamble, let's jump into the action here. I hit the play button. So the Orc army is advancing right away. Plague Claw catapults in the back are just jockeying into position. You can see their firing arcs are coming into range. The Skaven player has decided that the Sisters of Slaughter are the biggest threat, and he's shifting both of the Plague Claw catapults onto these Sisters to try and get them out of the fight. Meanwhile, the Doom Wheel is going after these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. I think that's the worst possible target it could be chasing after. If I were the Skaven player, I'd just be trying to disrupt the advance of the Dark Elf front line. And like if you can delay some units from engaging so it's not like a solid line, then it really gives a lot of openings for some of the skirmish play of these missile units to do some work. So Azhag is kind of coming around for position here. These Orc Boar Boys, I mean, they could take basically a free charge in here if they wanted to. I do have some Dread Spears in the back. I've realized right away that I don't have a mobility advantage versus my opponent. With 6 units of cav, I've repositioned my infantry to go very tight because there's no way I can contest all of this mobility from the Orc player. So initial engagements here, we got some bleak swords going into Skaven slaves. They'll have no problems here. This depleted unit of Sisters of Slaughter can also still chop up these Skaven slaves. The Death Runners are coming into a unit of bleak swords, which is not the best situation for them. But granted, there's not a lot of targets with high armor for them to really sink their teeth into. On this side, I try and take some initial pot shots in here with the dark Black Ark Corsairs with the handbows at Aztec, but he's going to have none of that, and he comes right into the action here. So I quickly pull him back. I cycle in the Dread Spears here. Goblin Big Boss. Very cool. You don't see this often either. Goblin Big Boss just on foot, like nothing crazy. The only reason I think my opponent took the Goblin Big Boss was just to buff the leadership of these Orc boys. Because normally Orc boys, they're very vulnerable to just breaking off with their low leadership. So having a Goblin Big Boss in here to just anchor that is really, really a nice play for my opponent. Meanwhile, these Cav are sneaking around the back, and I know it's just a matter of time until I'm going to get charged by them, with them, for them. Over here, Marathis unleashed her first Doom Bolt. So this is going to come down, hit one of the Plague Claw catapults, and bam, take one of those offline. So that's going to release a little bit of pressure from these Sisters of Slaughter. There's a lot happening here, so I'm going to put it into slow motion just to give us a chance. So with Wog Pop, the Dread Spears and the Giant the Dread Spears are in a lot of trouble. They've been attacked by the Orc Boar Boys. They're going to break. Black Ark Corsairs are also very low. The Orc Boar Boys got in a charge here on the Dark Riders, and so to help them out, I send in some Bleak Swords. The Supreme Sorceress is casting a fireball at Azhag the Slaughterer. And meanwhile, there's another fight here on the left flank with the Harganeth Executioners getting into it with some Orc Boar Boys and a Giant. So that's going to be probably a pretty even trade here. I do send the Blackguard of Nagrand in here to help out with the Giant. And then I cast the special skill from the Supreme Sorceress. It could do a ton of damage. Arnzipal's Black Horror right across the front line. Just trying to break off these chaff troops and see how much damage I can do there, because my front line was in trouble. Over here, Marathi's gotten into a bit of a mosh pit with the Skaven player. So Assassin has found his way onto the Warlord. Assassin's trophies pop. The Death Hag plus Marathi are debuffing all of the melee attack of the units here. So the Halberds are down to a melee attack of 1. So they're essentially rendered useless. Over here, Storm Vermin with Halberd have been caught up with some Dread Spears. That's an okay fight for the Dark Elf player. I mean, the Halberds will win, but they're not going to win decisively. It's going to take them a long time to get through it. Meanwhile, these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows are going to reposition over here onto the Doom Wheel and start doing some damage. As this is happening, Plague Claw Catapult is just bombing in more shots against the Sisters of Slaughter, who are desperately trying to push up their way into the artillery, and even if they can't take it out, they just want to disable it or take it offline for as long as possible. Bleak Swords are pushing their way up onto the Halberds and the Slingers over here, and Azhag is getting busy. Comes in here with a giant charge on the Supreme Sorceress. I've tried to keep her, you know, as far away from him as possible, but that's not an easy task. Azhag is one of the fastest characters in the game and deceptively quick for a large mount. Usually, you know, dragons have a speed of around 80 or 90, and Azhag on his mount with this Super Wyvern's got a speed of 110. So he's actually able to catch the Supreme Sorceress, who has a speed of normally she's at about 105. There's some debuff here going off on her. Let's see. Nope. Here we go. Speed. So there's poison. So yeah, Azhag has a poison attack. So if he makes contact with her, like her speed's dropping down to 80, he's got a speed of 110, and if he gets a wog off, it goes up even higher. So very, very dangerous and hard for the Supreme Sorceress to kind of keep herself out of trouble. Even if I do try and dive down, like with the poison on her, you can kind of debuff her for a little bit. I do eventually make my way down here, get in a nice little rear charge on these Orc Boar Boys. What I'm trying to do is just pull Azhag down closer to this Canine Assassin so that I can maybe get a little bit of protection onto my Sorceress. And I do have some Witch Elves nearby, so if they can rampage Azhag, then that could be a good situation for me, getting the Canine in here on Azhag. The the Orc Boar Boys have fled off here. The Blackguard of Nagrand are just too strong for them to deal with, especially with the Harganeth Executioner support and Flaming Sword of Ruin. The Giant is basically isolated now, but the Orc Boar Boys are free, and they've broken up the Dark Riders and are basically free to cycle charge. But the Orc front line is in tatters. Quick look at the balance bar right here. You can see it's still in our opponent's favor at this point. The Plagueclaw catapults are still active and online, but the Sisters of Slaughter have made their way into the back here. Dark Riders with repeater crossbows have managed to take out the Doom Wheel, so that's a positive. Now the Dark Elves are, like Justice, has essentially secured a mobility advantage, and the Warlord has taken a lot of damage from the Assassin here. Marathi is making her way into the action as well, so the Warlord is basically running, but Web of Shadows has been popped, so he's going to have a hard time getting away. It's an expensive option to take on the Canine Assassin if you're going to take all the other buffs, but in this case it looks like it's paying dividends. So very nice play. Sorry, I said Marathi was going onto the onto the Warlord. That's my mistake. That's the Death Hag. So either way, Assassin plus Death Hag is going to make short work of that Warlord. So things are starting to turn in the Dark Elves' favor on the left flank. Meanwhile, on the right flank, it is pandemonium. I've managed to break off most of the Orc infantry, but the Giants are still alive and have full health, and my Blackguard of Nagrand have taken a beating from fighting the first batch of Giant plus Orc infantry. So very tattered there. Some shots going into Azhag the Slaughter. He has backed away from the Witch Elves. They did rampage him for just 2 seconds, but I think maybe the Giant interrupted them or something, and he managed to escape. So I was like, oh no, this is bad news for me. I was unable to get the Assassin onto Azhag because these fleeing Orc Boar Boys were basically high massed and sort of knocking him out of the way. So I was like, oh man, what a missed opportunity. And now all of these Orc troops are basically going to regroup, and I got to fight them off again. So Azhag is going to cycle around here, just kind of wait for his troops to come back alive. These Sisters of Slaughter are going ham over here on the Plagueclaw catapult and these Clanrat spears. They are down to 25 models though, so even though their stats are way better, you know, numerically they are outnumbered. So the Dark Elf player Justice here, he's going to have to choose his spots really carefully. He notices these Halberd are pretty low on leadership, so he brings Marathi over there to try and just take them out of the fight. But as soon as they see Marathi, they run in the other direction, and Marathi's like, okay, well, I'm not going to chase them around the map. I've got priorities here. I'm going after the Plagueclaw catapult, so absolutely the right choice there. Meanwhile, the Death Hag is chasing after the Plague Priest. The Assassin's been mucked up in some Clanrat spears, but the Sisters of Slaughter are free. On the other side, Supreme Sorceress is still spitting pot shots at the Azhag the Slaughter, every fireball she can get, and things are looking up. You know, the balance bar is kind of even here. I've managed to sort of secure my front line. The Giants are, you know, at least they're isolated, but the Assassin is getting pounded by both of them, and I don't really have any cavalry to answer the Giants and tie them up just long enough for the Assassin to get away. So this is bad news, because without the Assassin, I really have no protection for my Supreme Sorceress. And these Blackguard of Nagrand, sure, they're amazing, but I'm only down to 32 models. Plus my opponent has the mobility advantage now that I've lost my Dark Riders. He's got all of these Orc Boar Boys who can cycle around and hit my Bleak Swords, hit my Dark Shards, so it's a very difficult situation for me. My Assassin escapes with very, very little health. I have to pull my Supreme Sorceress down. I try and keep her as close as possible to these Blackguard of Nagrand, but Azhag is just going to pound her. You know, like, he doesn't give a shit. He's coming right in here. And again, these Blackguard are just, they're in over their heads. There's 2 Giants plus Azhag. Like, that is a scary situation for them to be in. Supreme Sorceress of Fire is fleeing now. All of my, like, units are very tattered and also fleeing now, so it's sort of shifted the other way. Whereas before the Orcs were fleeing, now it's my turn to basically run for the hills. All I have left fighting are Harganeth Executioners and one unit of Bleak Swords and like a very tattered unit of Sisters of Slaughter and Blackguard. So pandemonium over here. On the far side, Marathi has found her way into this unit of Clanrats, and with the Assassin and the Death Hag, they're able to push off the Plague Priest. So the Plague Priest is still alive, but really far back. Sisters of Slaughter have done a valiant effort of trying their best to shut up this play clock catapult, but now it's a grind out fight between some dread spears and the clan rat spears, just desperately trying to take this play clock catapult offline. And this unit of Sisters of Slaughter, Plague Priest has summoned a unit of Plague Monks and put in a really nice rear charge, so they are also in deep trouble, but hopefully Marathi, Little Mama, can get over here and help out. Meanwhile, as my Supreme Sorcerers rally, but Azhag is relentless in his attack, and look at this, with Wog Pop, this guy is up to 137 speed, so I had no chance of kiting him at all with a Supreme Sorceress of Fire. It was just, forget it, I'm losing her, and that was it for her. And with my leadership routing, like, everything breaks here, so I literally have no units left to fight. I'm just like, Justice, is on you, buddy. You gotta bail me out here. So balance bar is in our opponent's favor, like, fairly heavily. But, you know, we're hoping maybe if some of these units can rally, we might still have a chance. These Dark Riders with repeater crossbows are pretty much our only answers to the Giants and the Cavalry right now, and of course Azhag. So very, very scary situation. And my units are right near the border, very close to just routing off the map entirely. Canine Assassin rallies, and I send him into the Orc Boar Boys, just desperately trying to see if I can shake their leadership and get them off the map, but no, the Boar Boys aren't having it, and the 6 models chase off the Canine Assassins, and then suddenly they have a change of heart. They get scared by this unit of Sisters of Slaughter who rally. So I lose 2 units there, but the Orc Boar Boys, they did what they needed to do. They took my last bit of leadership off the field. My Assassin's gone, and all of these units are basically running for the hills. Sisters of Slaughter in a grind out fight here versus some Storm Vermin with Halberd, but they have no problems dealing with that. With Marathi able to come over here, the last play catapult's been broken off. So, I mean, if we look at the battlefield now, like, the Plague Hawk catapults are disabled. The Plague Priest, it looks like it was able to, sneak its way away from the Plague Hawk catapults with the infantry screen and just make his way over to the Orcs. So nice play there by Exo Patriotic. So it looks like the right flank has been won by Denzin Wraith, and then the left flank has been won by Justice. So now balance bar is in our favor. Like, we're thinking, okay, maybe if we can just eliminate these giants, or maybe take Azhag down just a little bit more. Like, he's only at 1100 health, right? 3 or 4 volleys from these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows could maybe get his leadership low enough that, you know, 1 or 2 charges could just break him off the map. And Harganeth Executioners have managed to sneak their way into these Orc Boar Boys that were chasing these last 4 units of mine off of the map. So I'm like, okay, maybe if with them gone, these guys are going to rally. Like, we got a chance here. Marathi's chasing, like, the tattered remnants of the Plague Hawk catapult off of the map, and these Sisters of Slaughter are just cleaning up these last few units of Storm Vermin with halberds. But the difference here is, like, the Orc player has got all his units, like, really tightly grouped up together, and our army, like, we've got little pockets, like, all over the place, right? So we need to basically pull our stuff together and just regroup, because if we attack this, like, ball of Orc infantry all at once, we're just gonna lose here. So so a little bit of repositioning here. Sisters of Slaughter have rallied, but Azhag is gonna have none of that. You see here, he comes in and just breaks them off, and so here it is, final fight. Balance bar is in our favor, and the big reason is because we still have our basically a solid leadership core here from the Dark Elves intact. Canine Assassin, Death Hag, and Marathi, if they are together, they're going to be able to deal with the Goblin Big Boss. They can deal with Azhag, and so, like, really the big concerns were the Giants here. How are we going to deal with them? We've got 1 unit of very tattered Dread Spears, another unit of very tattered Dread Spears, and, like, 7 Blackguard of Negron. So our anti-large capabilities are limited really to these Dark Riders and their 4 ammunition here and 4 ammunition here. So we've got 8 shots and we have to use them very, very carefully. So Justice is a smart player. We're communicating and basically, like, agreeing, okay, we need to group up here. And I just fast forward here, and Azhag, he's getting a little crunk and wants to get in here on Marathi. Marathi drops Malakos Mystifying Miasma on here just so he doesn't get any wild ideas on the Bleak Sword. And he thinks better of it. You know, he sees 3 heroes here. His Orc boys are not engaged yet. And he doesn't have his Wog, right? Because he used it to chase off my Supreme Sorceress from the field. So yeah. Engagement's coming in here. Here's the big charge, like the final hurrah. Orc Boar Boys, Sisters of Slaughter. These are still pretty healthy, 39 models. They're going to cut up the Orc Boar Boys, no problem. Goblin Big Boss is trying to hunt after this leadership, and the Giants are going to work. So this is the scary part. Giant comes in here, and it just lays a beating on the Sisters of Slaughter and Dread Spears. Like, they're not designed to deal with a Giant. These Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, they're using their last bit of ammo, 3 shots here, just trying to do whatever damage they can on this Giant, get them off the Sisters of Slaughter. Death Hag comes in here to try and support her Sisters of Slaughter, debuff the melee attack of the Giant, get him out of the fight, and then Goblin Big Boss and the Giant come in here and start stomping on Marathi. And because the Death Hag is here, like, the Giant still has a decent melee attack of 52, right? And Marathi's being debuffed. Azhag comes in here, so all of a sudden you've got a 3-on-1 fight on Marathi. She takes a big charge from Azhag, who's got a Deadly Onslaught popped, I believe. No, Marathi has Deadly... Yeah. Marathi has Deadly Onslaught popped, but Azhag does not. But still, with the big charge, the Giant plus the Goblin Big Boss, like, that is bad news for Marathi. And the Assassin, like, he's nearby. He's close. But he got tied up in a couple of Orc boys. He's coming as quickly as he can, but Blessed with Filth is up, and he's going to have trouble getting there in time. So Marathi just taking a beating, and she goes down. So all of a sudden, balance bar is shifted. Tough break there. Dark Riders are out of ammo. Here comes a big... is this a Foot of Gork? What's going on here? Well, it's a Skaven Vortex spell. I forget what it's called. But anyway, that's going to do some work on the Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. And the Giant, I mean, because there's no more mass here, the Giant can pretty much do what he wants. So balance bar shifting decisively in our opponent's favor, and it's too bad because look at Azhag. He was down to 175 health. The Goblin Big Boss was completely tattered. There was another Giant with only 6 HP, right? If we could have just killed any of those 3 characters, I mean, this outcome could have been a completely different game. But you know, man, what a close fight, and you know, what a well-played game too. I think everyone who played, right? From my end, I think my army comp just really didn't enable me to do what I needed to do against Dens and Wraith in that fight. I mean, Azhag was literally the perfect counter to the Supreme Sorceress of Fire, and I think sometimes if you're just unlucky with your army comps, you know, like taking the Black Ark Corsairs was a bit of an unconventional pick and a bit of a gamble, and I don't think they gave me really any value this game. They're sort of a niche pick, and I've had some success with them against Skaven, and they can have some success against Orks, but you know, if your opponent has any mobility, they can really make those Black Ark Corsairs pay, and I didn't have like really enough spears, I think, to support them. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist from my army. Nothing too crazy to talk about. I think if I had a unit of heavy cavalry there, that could have maybe helped me out. For Justice, like, these Sisters of Slaughter were absolute MVPs, man. And I think if I'm going up against Skaven, you know, I'm definitely going to be bringing a couple of these chicks along. They can just cut up everything, and like I said, they don't suffer from those armor debuffs that the Plague Priest can use against the Dark Elves, which usually counters them pretty heavily. They're also fast, and the poison is a nice counter to the Skaven access to poison. So because of their speed, like, they can get up to those Plague Claw catapults a little bit faster than the Harganeth Executioners. So very cool here. The only thing for Justice is he didn't really have any large units. So even though he cut up Skaven pretty well, and he was able to deal with the Doom Wheel catapult, down the stretch, it was really difficult to deal with those giants. And I can't knock Justice, because like he definitely won his matchup, and had I won my matchup, he wouldn't have had to deal with the giants. But yeah, just, I mean, maybe if we were on the opposite side of the map, like, and he was facing off against the Orks and the giants, like he would have had the same problem that I had essentially. I mean, Marathi can dish out the damage, but she has to not be getting knocked around while she's doing it. Exo Patriotic, he had a good build there. I think the Doom Wheel could have been used a little bit more in the front line and less chasing around the beautiful crossbows. I think having that many units of Storm Vermin with Halberds is probably overkill. And unfortunately for him, like the Death Runners, they didn't really have a niche against Justice's army, because he went all like basically unarmored troops. So I mean, the Death Runners were used in the front line. I think that they should have been used for some rear charges if they could have. They do have very quick speed, and they have stock, so that's one thing I would have tried to do a little bit differently if I were playing the Skaven build. But cool, he took the Warlord. You don't see the Warlord very often, so you know, it was a fun game. And Denzin Wraith, like this guy gave me like he gave me my hands full and more. Like, this was an absolutely crazy build. I loved it. These Orc Boar Boys are a menace to deal with. They're so efficient for their cost. At only 650 gold, they can definitely trade upwards against a lot of infantry. Azhag the Slaughterer was like a nightmare for my Sorceress on the Pegasus to deal with, because he was just much faster, much tougher. And there was really no way for me to kite him with that. And my Black Guard were overwhelmed with the 2 giants plus Azhag. So going large worked out really well for him there. So super fun match. The only thing I think, like, and I'm going to probably make a video on this later, is you know, the Wog in a 2v2 or a 3v3 situation is really overpowered, because it's not only buffing the Orc army, it's also buffing the Skaven army. And I think personally, like, it's just, in a multiplayer battle, it's just too much. And I don't want to complain, because I've been the beneficiary of that too, but I think that's something that CA is going to have to take a look at. And I recognize, yes, there are other map-wide abilities, and I will talk about those later, but I think WOG is just by far the strongest map-wide ability. It lasts for a very long time, and it can be so decisive in turning the tides of battle there. So, you know, like the Skaven player had a whole bunch of Storm Vermin with Halberds, and like, yeah, they kind of lost out and they didn't do great, but like with a WOG on, this unit still racked up 144 kills. And I guarantee you, if there was no WOG, there's no way that they would have come anywhere close to that, because essentially it doubled their melee attack. So just something to think about, but very, very fun game. It came down to the wire, and as you saw the balance bar, it went like back and forth, like probably 4 times. So hopefully I got to play these guys again, and thanks for tuning in. Catch you later. Bye.